Hello, puppies and kittens. Welcome to another episode of Blasphemer's Bible on a different day because this weekend, the Bible is going to take us years to get through, and it's not going to do us any good if I have to keep taking weekends off while we're doing, touring something. So we're going to be doing some on Tuesdays because this weekend I'm going to be at American Atheist National Convention, and then on the 22nd I'm going to be in Fort Worth for a debate, and then the weekend after that I'm going to be in Boston for Satan Con, and the weekend after that I'm going to be in Canada for Reason Con. So going to be missing a lot of Saturdays for a little bit. So we're going to be doing them on Tuesdays, and I thank everybody for adjusting their schedule accordingly. Anybody have any opening statements? You guys are an excited bunch.
Oh. Yeah, I got nothing.
Sorry, I'm
it's
just having
weird.
a bit of camera trouble.
It's definitely weird doing this on a Tuesday, though. Well,
My sleep is completely ruined, so thank you.
you did need that. You did need that.
And tomorrow night is the Seder.
Yeah, Passover Eve, which is fitting because if we will check Exodus 12, we're going to enter the law part of Exodus finally, and that is about Passover.
Very, very good. All right, so who is reading today? I know Lilith can't be reading today. Isaac, you up for it?
I've also got a little bit of a cough.
Oh, okay. It was
All right,
seeming like
fine,
Isaac
fine.
might be a little bit more up than I thought. You seem a bit high there.
I'll read if Aaron, you want to play God?
No. Let's not play that game.
I was going to remind you for the conference in May, weed is legal in Canada, so we can all just go get edibles at the shop,
Well, you can enjoy that. I grew up in a Cheech and Chong movie.
You've
I did.
your-
Los Angeles in the early '70s is when I was a child. And just everything about the old Cheech and Chong movies, it just seems so familiar, like for where I grew up. But I mean, when I first tried to experiment with marijuana, it was laced with angel dust.
Oh dear.
Yeah, and so
Avoiding that is
14,
part of the
15-year-old
reason
me
you
had a
left.
really interesting weekend.
I think I'll read this because this is actually my parasha that I read for my bar mitzvah, so I think it's
Ooh.
fitting. Yep.
Oh wow, that sounds. See, if I had to do something like that, I chose not to. My parents and my grandparents didn't like it, but I chose not to. So if I had to do something like that,
Thanks.
and then this like the same section popped up, I'd be very traumatized. So good on you, Tomer.
Thank
The
you.
Flag of
I read
Locust
it.
for your bar mitzvah?
Yep, and it goes further. I think it's 11 and 12 as well. I think up to 14 it's the parasha, and I had to sing it like in a Yemenite way, so fun.
A plague of locusts for your bar mitzvah. You make it sound like a food item. It reminds me. It reminds me of when I cooked a bunch of crickets into vindaloo.
Yeah, locusts are technically kosher, I believe.
Certain species.
I think they are.
Yeah.
I don't see a reason
yeah.
why they shouldn't be.
Okay, do you
Ew.
want me to start?
Yes.
Okay. I think I should read up to 11.
And just to be sure,
So-
make sure you read it in English.
This is the JPS version. I mean, then
Is that?
I thought I'll read it in Hebrew just for the lulz, but no.
You could still do the Yemenite accent.
No, I forgot. I forgot
Okay.
entirely how to do it.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Then the Lord, here it's Yehovah. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Go to Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart and the hearts of his courtiers, in order that I may display these my signs among them." Yeah, it's a bit off, but okay. "And that you may recount in the hearing of your child and of your child's child how I made a mockery of the Egyptians and how I displayed my signs among them, in order that you may know that I am Yehovah." So Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and said to him, "Thus says Yehovah, the God of the Hebrews, how long will you refuse to humble yourself before me? Let my people go that they may worship me. For if you refuse to let my people go, tomorrow I will bring locusts on your territory. They shall cover the surface of the land so that no one will be able to see the land. They shall devour the surviving remnant that was left to you after the hail, and they shall eat away all your trees that grow in the field. Moreover, they shall fill your palaces and the houses of all your courtiers and of all the Egyptians, something that neither your fathers nor fathers' fathers have seen from the day. Sorry, from the day they appeared. Yeah, I had a saliva bit. From the day they appeared on earth to this day. With that, he turned and left Pharaoh's presence. Pharaoh's courtiers said to him, "How long shall this one be a snare to us? Let a delegation go to worship their god Adonai. Are you not yet aware that Egypt is lost?" So Moses and Aaron were brought back to Pharaoh, and he said to them, "Go, worship your God Adonai. Who are the ones to go?" Moses replied, "We will all go, regardless of social station. We will go with our sons and daughters, our flocks and herds, for we must observe Adonai's festival." But he said to them, "Yehovah be with you, the same as I mean to let your dependents go with you. Clearly you are bent on mischief. No! You gentlemen go and worship Yehovah, since that is what you want." And they were expelled from Pharaoh's presence. So,
Let's give a nice little round of applause.
thank you.
Does anyone else feel like God is a drama queen?
Well, I mean,
Well,
yeah, that will be even more apparent.
He's a little
throughout the rest of the
dramatic.
text. Yeah.
Yeah.
See, there it is.
Well, and the whole like, as no one has ever seen it. It rings a bit of my crowds were the largest anyone has ever seen. You know, it has that vibe.
In verse 2, I used the NIV for my commentary. So in the NIV, it's how I dealt harshly with the Egyptians. And the word that is translated to how I dealt harshly is hit alalti. KJV's rendering here is what things I have wrought in Egypt, which is supported by Rashbam, Tobiah ben Eliezer, and Gersonides, possibly deriving it from alilah, which means a deed in Hebrew. JPS, however, translates I made a mockery of the Egyptians, and this is supported by the Septuagint, Rashi, and Nachmanides.
So question here. So when you were reading in verse 2, it said in the hearing of your child and your child's child. It said.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if it's gendered. I don't know how Hebrew works, but
yeah, it is gendered. But the thing is that the version that I read is the contemporary JPS, which is trying to be gender neutral, so it doesn't really use the
Okay, but it does say if you're reading it in the original language, it would be your son and your son's
sons.
Yeah. Okay.
Same thing with verse. Where is it? Verse 7. In my translation, it's let a delegation, but here it literally says send the men or the people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that too. It said in the NIV, it just said we will go with our old and our young, as opposed to anyone regardless of rank.
Yeah, that is also because of the gender neutral. Old and young, but it says here taking na'ar, which is the young, and saken, old, to be social rank. Yeah.
By the way, what is JBS?
PS, the Jewish Publication Society. That's the Bible by the
Yeah, it's the most popular Jewish translation of the Tanakh, and the contemporary JPS is more or less the same as the JPS, but it's a new translation that was done in 2012. 2006.
I can't find it. I can't find it on Bible Gateway.
I don't think you will.
It probably wouldn't be there.
It's interesting though that Safaria, which is I always thought was more of a Jewish Orthodox website, has the contemporary as their default version of the JPS.
Which version was written by Satan?
The NIV. Um,
All of them. They were all written by Satan. All of them.
All right, I'm going to read
Um,
a couple of comments that have come up. Yeah, Frederick Agerbo says, "What I love about this show is that I can say to my grandma that I'm watching a Bible study. She's so confused." That and Lilith, Tomer, and Lawrence. Fine. Also you, Aaron.
Aw.
uh,
And then Boda says, "Has Aaron seen the Netflix series about the salamander god controversy within the Mormon Church?" No, I haven't. And this is the wrong show to bring up that. I don't know when I'm going to be doing another Book of Mormon, but it's not as long a book as the Bible, so we don't have to do Tuesdays for that one.
Yeah, I've been doing the Bible show for what, almost 7 years now.
good on you.
And
Yeah.
we are getting very close. We are in the pastoral epistles right now.
Woo!
Yeah. So once we get
Go
to,
team.
I'm very excited to get to Revelation, because that is actually probably one of my favorite books in the Bible. It's really cool, and I mean,
It's insane.
it is. It's really, I think it's insane in a good way. There is also, I'm sure, Aaron, you might enjoy once we get to Ecclesiastes, because it's very nihilistic. So I love it.
I think Ecclesiastes is the only good book in the Bible.
I
Ecclesiastes
always
and
thought
about half of Proverbs.
I always thought that Ecclesiastes was the only wisdom in the Bible, the only thing I could honestly call wisdom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd agree. And like I said, about half of Proverbs, not all of it, but there's some good parts in there.
Yeah, my favorite passage of the Bible is out of Ecclesiastes 3.
Would I be right in thinking that when we get to the New Testament, we're going to have like a shakeup of the panel?
Maybe.
I had to look
I
up
mean-
what nihilistic is.
Yeah, there's a little bit of conflict there, because I interviewed a nihilist at one point who convinced me that I was nihilistic myself, that I'm nihilist myself. I think nihilistic might imply something else, but a nihilist, the way that it was expressed to me by, if you want to know what somebody believes, don't ask a Baptist, because a Baptist doesn't know. But I mean, this is what I was told about what atheists believe, always wrong. What nihilists believe was wrong. I was told that nihilists believe in nothing, or that everything is meaningless. And
Those are two
the
different types of
nihilistic,
nihilism.
yeah, and the nihilist was explaining to me that the way they define it themselves is that if you want your life to have meaning, it's not arbitrarily imposed upon you by some external force. You decide what you want your life to mean. And I'm like, well, okay, that makes a lot of sense. I would do that.
Yeah. There's no
Sounds like
objective
existentialism.
meaning. Yeah, it is. Yeah, existential nihilism. Yeah, where there is no objective meaning, so you
Yeah.
have to impose one. Yeah.
And I always thought the question of
Property of
what
a
is the meaning of
mind.
life, I always thought the question of what is the meaning of life to be a stupid question.
Yeah, it.
Well, of course it is. Everyone
assumes.
knows the answer is 42.
In
I
all
think we
fairness,
should,
I did get a clip from that particular show. Arn crying, raising up his hands and screaming, "What's the point?" So if you ever see that on Twitter, that was me.
Oh.
Tomer, did you have
I-
more comments?
Yes, I had more.
I use it
verse
as a
5.
reply to stupid tweets.
Okay, verse 5. The face of the ground. So the Hebrew Bible literally reads the eye of the earth. Chacham writes that it could either mean that the surface of the land, as Rashi renders it, and also, yeah, I think the JPS. Yeah, JPS also, or the eye that sees the earth. Targum Onkelos and Sade Gaon render the eye of the sun of the earth.
What?
Doesn't
Yeah.
Rashi say the view of the earth?
So this one is so it's supposed to be taken metaphorically, right? Like absolutely everything will be covered, like everything in your vision will be covered with this. But also I'm not sure if there is a polemic here against Ra. Not entirely sure, and not Ra, Horus. So I am unsure of that. but that would be an apt metaphor if that were the case.
Yeah, I think we'll get to the Ra mention in Darkness, actually, the Plague of Darkness, because there is something there. But yeah,
There's also
Um,
something else about a star that's called Ra, but I
yeah,
don't
yeah.
think
It's
that's
in
connected
it's
to
in the
Ra.
Darkness part.
Oh, okay.
I think
Verse
we have the
6.
man we should be asking.
Yeah,
Mr.
Ra?
Arden Ra?
Yeah,
Oh,
don't confuse
yeah.
me with that bitch Horus.
You know,
You pimp
in
slapped Taurus, didn't you?
a good amount of the time, they are seen together as one unified entity. So you might be Horus as well.
Now, verse 6, something neither your parents nor your ancestors have ever seen. So, Professor Aaron Shulov writes, a flying camp of locusts is a very impressive phenomenon, the clear and detailed description of which appears in the Bible in Joel chapters 1 and 2. At first, a black cloud appears in the horizon. It approaches quickly, and as it approaches, it covers the sky. Everything turns dark, and the air is filled with creatures that fly, land, crawl on the ground and on the plants, and feed on them. It is hard to believe the sight of the eyes and the hearing of the ears, even if, for each generation, the locusts' attacks, quote unquote, reoccur. The feeling is always as if this is happening for the first time. Compare Joel 2:2.
I read the Laura Ingalls Wilder books growing up, the actual books, not just Little House on the Prairie, the whole set. And in one of the books, they had moved to a new area, and there was a locust invasion. And there was this horrible moment where they had all gone in the house, but the window was open, and the locusts, I guess, had eaten whatever and were marching like as if they were in formation. And so they crawled in the one window and were climbing over the baby, and they were like, ah! So they opened the window on the opposite side, closed this window, let them continue marching out, and then closed the window behind them. And it was like, yeah.
And finally, verse 10, clearly you are bent on evil. The KJV here renders, look to it, for evil is before you. And the Hebrew Bible literally reads, evil is before or against your faces. Sana comments here, the literal meaning of the Hebrew is ambiguous and has given rise to various interpretations. Exodus Rabbah 13:5 and Rashbam render, you have evil intentions. That is, you do not intend returning after 3 days. Nachmanides and Targum Pseudo-Jonathan interpret, you are foredoomed to disaster, an understanding that would seem to be supported by 32:12. Another interpretation by Rashi, so here's the Ra part, constructs Hebrew Ra'ah, here mischief or evil, as the name of a star. Pharaoh makes an astrological prediction that its configuration is an omen of disaster for the departing Israelites. Finally, Ra'ah has also been taken to be a Hebraized form of the name of the Egyptian god Ra, as Kasuto and Chacham suggested.
Yeah,
Got another chat to read.
It is interesting that now we know that Ra is evil. So sorry,
Yeah.
Aaron. Sucks for you, buddy.
Yeah.
The
sun. How could the sun be evil?
Well, I mean, considering the solar worship that was going on in Egypt for a very long time, since even before the Old Kingdom.
Probably not after this event.
No, I figured that was what the Plague of Darkness was a hit against, but that's next. I mean,
yes,
and it wasn't Amenhotep like after this. I mean, we can't say there's a before this or after this since we don't know when this is, and it wasn't ever a historic event anyway. But I mean, Amenhotep was after, let's say, 1250 BC, wasn't he?
Well, it depends on which one we're talking about, because there are a whole lot of Amenhoteps. So
I think he's talking about the father of Akhenaten, no?
Well, yes. If you're talking about okay, so if you're talking about the third, then if we place the Exodus in the 12th century, which is what like scholars who still think that the Exodus actually happened usually place it in the 12th century, I think, this would have been
What's
after,
the point?
Exactly.
this would have been after Amenhotep III. Now, in Amenhotep III was
Why does this always happen though, Lawrence, where it isn't that not the time period according to the Bible, but it's always referenced as always being in that time period. It just bothers me.
But
I'm not an Egyptologist, but it's just so annoying. Just
so
since I do take the Bible literally, I mean.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure exactly what you mean. Maybe I'm just stupid, but
No, you're fine. I think if you count it up based on what the Bible says, the genealogies, the time period would be about 1450 BCE, right?
Right, but
the problem is if you take
every specialist wants to say it's in 12th century BCE and then say, oh, but it never happened because there's no evidence for it.
Well, it depends on who you're talking
to. Period.
I want to point out that it depends on who you're talking to, first of all. There is a dating of the narrative itself, like the actual construction of it. There is a dating of the event if it were real. And the inclusion of the city of Ramses would be our best historical link to that. And the and we know the building projects there fairly well. And and then you have to it differs from person to person, right?
Well, I appreciate you, Lawrence. I just like what you just said just made my point though, is that it's not, you're not looking during the time period that the Bible has established it to be.
It's because the Bible got it wrong.
They look at every possible time period. It doesn't matter.
The traditional Jewish year for the Exodus is 2448 after creation, which is 1313 BCE, which is that called the 14th century BCE?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So it's 200 years earlier than both Amenhotep and I guess what scholars think is the most likely.
Shut up.
Christian scholars, biblical scholars think is the most likely. So they're actually already they realize that it can't be the traditional date.
Also, I would like to point out that the dating of these things, if we were to go by the genealogies, that also hasn't remained consistent, because as I pointed out on this last Saturday, so in the book, what was it, Israelite and Judean History, I think, the book that I recommended, the first section is all about how, not all about how, but it tells a lot about how dating has been seen over time and by who and when and how exactly they were tracking the genealogies and how that's different. That has not always remained consistent. So,
so is your argument that the Bible hasn't been like always consistent, or I guess in this case the Torah?
If you try to use the genealogies themselves, and people have done this, I mean, they've tried to follow Bishop Ussher's guidelines, and they show that the flood, for example, according to Bishop's way of Bishop Ussher's way of measuring the different genealogies, that puts the flood at the same time as Sargon of Akkad. There are a bunch of things that don't match. There's no way that this can be reconciled. So the genealogy means is wrong.
Not to mention, I think there are some different genealogies that contradict each other. I mean, obviously, the most famous example is the two genealogies of Christ, both descending to his father and both uniquely inspired after King David.
I think for that case, those were supposed to be two different lines entirely.
Yeah, but they both lead to different men who are the father of Joseph and said to be the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary, of whom it was thought Jesus was, and like the current apologetic is that one of them is for Mary, despite the fact that that's not what it says. And a really funny thing is that I believe the early church at one point had an apologetic that there was no contradiction because the mother was married to two different men in sequence. One of them died and then she married the other, and it wasn't certain whose the baby was. And that same thing happened with Joseph. Basically Joseph had two dads, kind of a thing. And
Good
yeah.
Yeah. I got to read a couple more comments. Treborn Wright says, what was the point of the plagues of the Exodus? According to the text, the Pharaoh never converted to Judaism, and neither did he accept the Jewish God, which is important because even if this happened before Akhenaten and so forth, the fact remains Egypt remained a polytheist country. Had this ever actually happened, and Pharaoh had seen that the Jewish God was this powerful thing and greater than all of his gods, but there's still no conversion in Egypt.
Well, a lot of them are in the bottom of the Reed Sea.
No, they're not. And even if that were the case, you're going to say that they had to wipe out the entire population of Egypt. So who populated Egypt now? Who were the descendants? Right.
There
so
are dark periods during history of
either. I'm
there
sorry,
are
what?
dark periods. I think there's dark periods during the history of Egypt that they haven't been able to fill in yet.
Well, there is not exactly dark periods. There is something close to it in the intermediate periods where we have far less sources, but we still do have sources for those periods, and it's mostly because there was no essentially there was no bureaucracy at that point. So
and you remember that time when Ezekiel said
tough to
that
rule when you're underwater.
when Ezekiel said that he was a prophet, and he said that Nebuchadnezzar II was going to wipe out Egypt so thoroughly that the foot of no man nor beast would ever set foot in the country of Egypt for 40 years. You remember when that happened? Oh, yeah, it didn't.
Yeah, I always just Google Map Tyre whenever I feel like
So,
laughing.
Lawrence, I got a question.
Prophecy.
So, I was ready to write it down. What contradictions are there when it comes to the genealogies leading up to where we're at in Exodus? If you don't know, it's okay.
Oh, so
I just want to know what to look at from my perspective, right? I'm not going to go to tradition. I'm going to go to,
Yeah, I think there are. If you go between Second Chronicles and the rest of the genealogies that we get throughout the Torah, there are some contradictions between those. So
are they gaps or contradictions?
Contradictions, straight up contradictions.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, if you have some, I would like to know.
Yeah, I don't know them off the top of my head. I'd have to go.
It's okay.
Check some commentaries,
Okay.
but.
Aaron, I think you should.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. So I've got another comment from Deviant Outcast.
Oh, he left.
It says, what are they on about? I know they're talking about timelines, but it seems like they're trying to equivocate actual history and mythology. I mean, the biblical account doesn't fit reality.
We know.
Yeah. So here's the way of looking at it. So there is actual history in the Bible, and history and mythology at this point in time were jumbled together. So it is our job as scholars, as students of this, to figure out what is myth and what is history. And the way we do that is, well, first we have to read the sources. That's a big one. And then we have to check it through other sources as well and see what we can verify and what we can't. And depending on your outlook, you may or may not add or omit the magical aspects. Now, me personally, and I think for most of us on this panel, we omit those aspects as mythological. But at the same time, we have to realize that at that point in time, that was how history was written. And it's also important to realize that what we're discussing now in the Torah, up until we get to the Deuteronomistic history, we don't have proper historiography. So the Deuteronomistic history is where we actually have a Jewish history. And there are plenty of mythological aspects in that. And once we get there, we'll, parse what we can. But as of right now, we're reading an entirely different type of text, an entirely different genre of text. So we have to approach it differently.
And I'd like to point out that when you say the mythological elements are included, that was the way they thought of the world. They would personify various things as gods. You would say the god of the wind came to our aid, and because the wind blew your ship towards a safe harbor. So you would phrase it as the deliberate actions of a god, but physically your boat was pushed towards a safe harbor, and thus you live to write about it, and or tell the story of whatever happened. So in a culture like this, where they're, if not monotheistic at the time that parts of this were written, monotheistic by the time they tried to weave it all back in together, a lot of that has been lost. It's not as simple as that to figure out. It's not, oh, Poseidon, blah, blah, blah. But that element of it, yeah, it's also a clue to what actually happens. If misfortune befell someone you disliked, you would say that a god cursed them, and that was the perspective you would look at it from.
Yeah.
Does that mean a god actually cursed them? No, I seriously doubt that. But
Well, I missed whatever we're talking about. Sorry, I don't know what happened.
Oh yeah, we're
Satan
just
got
responding
me.
to one of the comments.
Satan doesn't want you studying the Bible.
That sneaky guy.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, shall we move on?
Okay.
Okay, this is verse 12. Then Adonai said to Moses, "Hold out your arm over the land of Egypt for the locusts, that they may come upon the land of Egypt and eat up all the grasses in the land, whatever the hail has left." So Moses held out his rod over the land of Egypt, and the Lord drove an east wind over the land all that day and all night. And when morning came, the east wind had brought the locusts. Locusts invaded all the land of Egypt and settled within all the territory of Egypt in a thick mass. Never before had there been so many, nor will there ever be so many again. They hid all the land from view, and the land was darkened, and they ate up all the grasses of the field and all the fruit of the trees which the hail had left, so that nothing green was left of tree or grass of the field in all the land of Egypt. Pharaoh hurriedly summoned Moses and Aaron and said, "I stand guilty before you, God the Lord, and before you. Forgive my offense just this once, and plead with your God the Lord that this death be removed from me." So he left Pharaoh's presence and pleaded with the Lord. The Lord caused a shift to a very strong east wind, which lifted the locusts and hurled them into the sea of reeds. Not a single locust remained in all the territory of Egypt. But the Lord stiffened Pharaoh's heart, and he would not let the Israelites go. So, verse 13, the Lord made an east wind blow across the land. So, again, Shulov writes, the east wind was the one that brought the locusts from the direction of Sudan and Eritrea. From there, it's in a state of a single appearance and turns under appropriate climate conditions into a swarm of locusts that is carried by the wind to the lands of the eastern Mediterranean Sea. The east wind brings the locusts, but the wind that comes from the sea lifts it to the air and drops it into the Red Sea. Compare verse 19.
So on that, actually, I did want to point out that this is a Hebrew idiom that would have been coined in Canaan, probably, because in Egypt the wind would have been, the wind bringing in these things would have been different. So yeah, in Egypt, such winds and blights would typically come from Sudan to the south. So the terminology east wind means that this originated in the Canaan area.
Well, I don't know. Throughout the Bible, east wind is defined differently, I think. From
Yeah,
I mean,
because
It is,
it's
yeah, but
considered. It's also
developed in
metaphysical. Yeah.
yeah, but it is an idiom that
Correct. Yeah.
yeah. So we can, because of that, it can be used in many different ways. But at the same time, we can also, because of the reference that it actually is, we can also place the idiom, which is very useful.
P-Town, have you ever watched The Bible's Buried Secrets?
I don't think so.
It's a Nova documentary. It's several years old, so you should be able to access it for free. I found it interesting because it was, we've already mentioned the scholars that looked into the origin of ancient Israel. But one of the hypotheses given was that there was a great city in Canaan that was overthrown by its slave population. And while this city was obviously not in Egypt, it was, I believe, a tributary to Egypt at that time. And it's hypothesized that it's at least possible that early Jewish settlements came from these slaves that rose up and ran away, and that they had a very egalitarian lifestyle. They didn't have like the rich end of town and the poor end of town. Everyone had the same style of houses and so forth. So you can look at what's involved in that. I might recommend watching that documentary and seeing what it says, because I like this, at least the opposition to slavery in theory in this story, and I do, I could see that being part of a cultural value.
Well, I wrote it down. I've this whole topic, I'll be honest with everybody, I really struggled to focus. I've watched a documentary, I think called Patterns of Evidence, Exodus, that I bought on YouTube. I've fallen asleep to it. I probably watched it 5-6 times, and I still can't dictate what I watch probably. But there is a city similar to that. I think it's Avaris.
Yeah, Avaris. That was the Hyksos capital in the first intermediate period.
So like the reason why with Lorence I've been
My bad. Sorry,
pressing him a little bit is partly because I'm finally getting pushed by other people too to actually focus on this. So there is this land in what we would call now Goshen, or back then called Goshen, and there's this town called Avaris. If you dig deep enough, there's evidence of there being what would they call Semitic people, Lawrence?
Yes, because
you mentioned the houses, Lilith. Yeah, the problem is they basically found this dude who there was Egyptian homes built over it, like after a certain period of time, and it looks like Joseph was placed there, right? I mean, they found
Is this the documentary that was trying to find evidence by hook or by crook for the Exodus, that pushed around the timelines to try and put it in a dark period?
Correct. So the argument, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so on that, so we did talk about when we were covering Joseph. I think I covered in detail the only time period that the Joseph narrative could have even taken place based on the hints of Egyptian culture we get. And the only place that it could even have feasibly been is it would be set in the 4th or 5th centuries. No, 5th or 6th. Yeah, 5th or 6th centuries BCE in Egypt, because that would be all the cultural hints we get about Egypt would only line up with that period. And there is the famine stela, for example, from Elephantine, which dates that period, which might be the time period, I should say, that the Joseph story originated. Now, of course, it is placed way earlier than that period.
Way earlier. So this is where I'm coming from, Lawrence. You have this theory that it's in 500, 600 BCE. Egyptologists are going to say it's 1900 or 1800 BCE.
No, they're not.
Hold up. Maybe I can clear this up. It depends on the Egyptologist you're talking to. For example, Redford, he is a very well-known Egyptologist. He would be like on my side for this one. I think his name is Daniel Redford. When it comes to the Joseph story, he wrote a whole book about it, and it's been very critical in Joseph scholarship. But for other people, for example, like Kenneth Kitchen or maybe even Hoffmeyer, they are Egyptologists, but they are also biblical literalists. So it depends.
I hate those guys. Sarcasm.
So it depends on who you're talking to, but it's also important to remember that those Egyptologists, none of them are biblical scholars. So they can give you information about Egypt, and you should take that information about Egypt. But once they start dipping their toes in the Bible, they're out of their element. Straight up. They are
Well,
just
this
out of
this is where I'm coming from, Lawrence. Like, you have a huge portion of Egyptologists who want to say it's 1900 and whatever, or 1800 and whatever. You're going to say it's 600 or 500 and whatever. What I'm
Well,
saying is there's a pattern here that should be considered as possible evidence for what the Bible says. When it's
I think-
clear that people can't agree when this stuff happened. Why? Because it's just remnants in dirt.
Well, it
I would
depends.
say it's noteworthy, right, Lawrence?
Well,
It's noteworthy to say that this might have been Joseph's tomb. It might have been where he resided, right? I mean, you have a huge timeline here where people who are way smarter than us and who spend their lives investigating it, they can't even agree by 1,200 years.
yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It is. I
So
understand.
let's look at the facts, though, line up with the Bible. That's what I'll say.
So I do want to point out that when I am dating,
Hold on, I just want to give credit to Lawrence for being so much more reasoned, or not reasoned. Maybe well, yeah, that's
Patient
adequate.
with me.
He's
I
so
get it.
he's so much more patient than I am. But what
I
but
would
you-
agree.
I wanted to.
Me
I'm
too,
sorry to
because the facts don't line up with the Bible, and the only
Yeah,
way
but
to get them
P-Town
there.
just said, let's just look at how the facts line up with the Bible. If only P-Town would look at how the facts don't fucking ever goddamn match the Bible.
All right,
Ever. Period.
all right, I
Where the
agree,
way the
Lawrence.
facts
let's
always
well,
only ever contradict everything the
be-
fucking fairy
before we-
tale says every day.
I did
Or
agree.
before
I'm
P-Town, the
just
young
saying-
young Earth creationist gets beat down by the panel, I just want Lawrence
Panel
to have a
is just
chance to
me.
answer my question. Is there a chance that the facts line up with what the Bible says when it comes to Joseph and what we've excavated?
This
So-
illustrates
chance.
an important question we have to ask first. You said, is it possible? How do we determine whether something is possible or not?
Well, you have to not harden your heart.
Okay, yeah, that's
fuck
just a
does
bit
that
of
mean?
All right.
spiritual gaslighting that they use to say whenever you disagree with
It's
me,
re-
your
it's
heart
rel-
is hardened.
Calm
But
down, guys.
I'm
Okay.
gonna suggest because one could argue in a many universe hypothesis that anything is possible. I'm going to suggest that we use the standard of reasonable doubt. Is it reasonably feasible that this could be so?
Is it possible that monkeys might fly out of my ass?
Yes, I've seen it happen. No, I'm okay. Okay, so I did have an answer to P-Down's question. So when I am dating these texts, it's worth to remember what I am dating is the text. I'm dating its composition. Firstly I date the composition before I decide if I should take it literally or not, or how literally I ought to take it. And that alone requires a whole bunch of context and a whole lot of study. So when I'm saying that the Joseph story, for example, is from the 5th or 6th centuries BCE, I'm talking about the story itself. I understand when the event is placed in biblical chronology, if it were to be taken literally. But firstly, I'm dating the text, and then
Can I clarify my question though?
sure.
Because it's not time related, because I already pointed out how Egyptologists as well as yourself can't agree on the timeline by 1200 years, which is somewhat correct, right, Lawrence? So my point is that the evidence found in the dirt is consistent with what we would expect if we were to find something that would point to Joseph. Isn't that correct?
So like I said, it kind of I would
I'm
say that
sorry
the
that I'm
Besides
sorry
the
that I'm
timeline.
interrupting, but
So if we
I'm
find
sorry that
someone
I'm
who's
I would say.
I'm sorry that I'm
Tomer,
yeah.
now's not the right time.
what?
Lawrence,
I mean, we're
we found that we find a
uh-huh.
statue a small town with some Semitic similarities, right?
There's a
With
reason for
then it was gifted by some Egyptian rich dude, right, to build some better stuff on top of it.
that.
And then in that archaeological find, you have a grave site with a statue of a multicolored coat dude, okay, with his hair parted and a couple other similarities that would point to possibly it being like Joseph, correct? Isn't that what we found?
For that one specifically, if we're talking about Avaris and we're talking about the Hyksos, I actually did want to do my own kind of deep dive into the origin of the Israelites and the relation to like the Hyksos and the Apiru and stuff like that. I did want to do a deep dive into it. But the Hyksos, the reason that we find that they were Semitic was because they were Semitic, or Egyptians called them Asiatic invaders. That's what they called them. And they ruled disconnected from the pharaohs, not the pharaohs, any kings, any rulers at the time in Egypt were completely disconnected from them entirely until they were driven out. And that would have been the end of the first intermediate period, the second intermediate period, and the beginning of the 18th dynasty. So yes, they were Semitic, but it's important to remember that Semitic is a little vague in this context. So we have no indication that they were Hebrew or Israelite, because those things didn't exist until later. And we can,
besides appealing to them having the wrong time, wouldn't it be true that what the evidence that we found is very
No,
similar to
you
what we would
can't.
expect
why
according to
No.
what the Bible says?
why would we discount the time though? That's a very critical
Well,
part of
we
it.
This
we
is an
basically
entirely
established in the
different
beginning
story.
that time, in according to my argument, is irrelevant because you Egyptologists, as well as you, Lawrence, have 1,200 years that you're arguing about when it comes to this site.
No,
So
again,
my
Pete
point
Town,
is
this
that
is the
the
part you
evidence,
did not listen to, where he was talking about the dating of the story and when it was written down, and that these
Putting
are
it-
relevant, important parts, because the cultural hints mean that the story was written down much, much later than would be possible for the Joseph narrative. But the point is, I watched, and Aaron, you may not have watched this particular documentary. It was basically a response to the documentary that I suggested, and it was a man with no expertise who wanted a way to find the biblical story true, going around to as many different scholars as he could, taking a tiny bit out of anything they said to try and weave together a way that it might be hypothetically possible. There's still no evidence for it, but it's not technically impossible if we switch this over here, move this over here, change the timeline, and do this other thing. And I watched that whole documentary, and the amount that scholars, brought these tiny bits here and there. It was not laid out long form the way that it was in reputable documentaries, where you make an entire point and declare, you get tiny bits of contention over this or that dating thing. And that's part of the reason I believe that you want to make the dating irrelevant, P-Town, is because that entire argument is based on shrouding the elements of dating, and it's just not feasible. This was not Joseph. These are Semitic people that were not under the pharaohs. This was not slaves of the pharaohs. This doesn't work with the story unless you only glance at it very superficially from the side of your eye and ignore 90% of what's known about it.
I
And
just want to
I also-
emphasize
not
again that we already established, Lawrence, and by the way, I appreciate you, Lawrence. I do. We established that Lawrence believes that it's in 500, 600, and I agree with
Not
you. I think
set
that from your
then,
perspective,
written then.
I understand why you would believe that, right? But
Do you
the
understand
majority
the
of
difference between the
Egyptologists
setting and
think
when it
it's
was
way,
written?
way, way older, correct? So,
It's some
Some
not
do,
all of them, but the
certainly.
majority of them.
No,
My point
not
is
the
that
How do
they
we know that
don't.
it's majority, P-Town?
I'm not sure if it's majority. I don't actually know.
Sorry to interrupt
don't know.
again, but I think we should go back to the subject that we talked about. I also see the comments
Much as
piling up.
much as I would love to do this, P-Town, I spent an hour with you to
like
try to
15
talk
minutes.
about what the evidence found in the ground shows, and I couldn't get you to look at any of it. We spent an entire hour and couldn't find a place to start from. It was a completely fruitless hour, and we're going to do
All
that
I'm saying
again.
is the Avaris statue it patterns with Joseph.
It doesn't,
And
and I
everything that
encourage
doesn't,
people to look
And
into
your
it.
argument is that it's not the
I
right time
encourage
period.
people. No, that's not the only argument. That is not the only argument. If you think that, you have not been listening.
Right,
Everything about the story doesn't match with Joseph. It doesn't matter. I encourage people to look into it on their own in its entirety, because this does not work unless you take like 3 elements of it and ignore everything in context.
all right, let me read through some comments real quick, and then we can
Yes,
get
let's
back
do
to the
that.
reading. Joe G says, happy no kosher Passover to y'all. Don't forget to check your video doorbell for the prophet Elijah creeping at your door.
Thank you. I'll keep that in mind.
Yes.
And then Jasa
Yep.
says, I have a history question. What's the point of Exodus? Like, why are Jews writing propaganda against the Egyptians, especially because none of this actually happened?
I think that this was a founding myth, basically, just the origin story of the Israelites.
And it works nicely the way they wrote it with the Exodus from Egypt and then mirrored to the Exodus from Babylon. I think there was definitely some of the construction there was meant to say sort of the theme of we were exiled and returned. We were exiled and returned. You know, we were in bondage in some sense, not necessarily that they were all chattel slaves in Babylon, but you know, you're getting thematic. And also, there is definitely some anti-Egyptian sentiment around the Babylonian invasion and the world politics at that point, which we can note when we get to it. But it's definitely a thing.
And then Minute Rice offers $6.66 and says, I wonder if they could have warded off the locusts if they had some spicy pepper.
Oh, you love that spice. I know you for sure.
Pepper spray the locusts.
Then Christopher Van Oster says, covering an entire country in locusts sounds like someone who would have written that down or painted something about it. Is there anyone outside the Bible who wrote of that event?
I don't know why all the because we often look through people's garbages, like the garbage of different cultures, to see, because broken bits of pottery are thrown away. Like, everybody leaves junk, and that tells a lot more about your day-to-day life than you'd think. I want to know where like the giant piles of frogs' bodies and locust bodies that apparently blacked out the sun and covered every inch of everything. Like, you're not telling me there's like a layer in their garbage heap of just fucking frogs.
Yeah, and like that 40-year period where no man and beast would ever walk there. We can look all damn day to find, well, if you stand on a chair and tilt your head sideways, well, then this could kind of sort of match Joseph. And let's just completely ignore the prophecy of Ezekiel failed. Can we just say that word? The prophecy failed. But we can't do that because confirmation bias.
Failed. Even some of them,
We've got to look for what we want to believe and ignore what we don't want to admit. So Deviant Outcast says, we know the time period of the famine stele, or Stella. I'm not really sure about the pronunciation there.
Don't worry about it.
The problem with the Joseph story versus Egyptology is that Egyptologists study ancient Egypt and the history and culture of ancient Egypt, not the Bible. Then Eric, somebody say something?
Oh, I was just agreeing. Yeah, they don't study the Bible. Yeah.
And then I think it's Eric Wander, gifted 5 RN Raw memberships. Thank you very much. And then Deviant Outcast once again says, I think I'm confused because I came at this purely as an Egyptologist. We have a timeline. The problem with the Bible is it doesn't fit with any timeline of any culture of the time. And that's correct. It doesn't.
Thank you. Well, there you go. We have an actual Egyptologist. That helps, because I'm definitely not one of those. I always thought Egypt was cool, but
Well, I'm actually not done with my commentary.
We have to get T-shirts made.
It's a good.
Yeah. I
want
didn't use the
Tomer,
F word
I'm
this time.
actually, I have more commentary T-shirts.
I mean, I
Yeah.
tell you, Tomer, I tell you this sincerely. I wish there was some way we could get your ass to Canada next month.
Oh, that would be so fun.
Pray to God for that.
I'll
Verse
write a letter to Santa too.
Verse 17. Take this deadly plague away from me. So the Masoretic text reads here, take from me only this death. Early translations and KJV also render only this death. Bachya Ben Asher comments that it could either mean that people died during the plague as they did in the plague of hail, or that the plague of hail and of locusts killed the crops of the land, and so there's nothing left for the people to live on.
So they're all gonna starve to death. Yay! Happy times.
And finally, verse 19, the Red Sea, that's the NIV, but the JPS translates to Sea of Reeds, from the meaning of the Hebrew phrase Yamasuf, when suf means reed. While the Septuagint and the Vulgate translate to Red Sea, Targum Onkelos and Targum Pseudo-Jonathan translate Sea of Reeds.
Isn't the Sea of Reeds that giant marsh that Cleopatra's first husband brother drowned in during their civil war?
Well, I'm not sure about that part, but yeah,
I
Sea of
think- I
Reeds is
think it is
not
the
the
one
Red
and
Sea.
one.
Yeah, that was taken from the Septuagint.
No, yeah, but it's a big marsh area that
Right.
is, well, treacherous to wheels, as all marshes are, and whose degree of dampness fluctuates drastically with the wind. So,
Okay, shall I move on?
Please.
There is one comment. Rashi said that you asking about like what happened to all the locusts. So he says not one locust remained within the borders.
so they're all just
and,
blown away.
and Rashi says even the salted ones, because the Egyptians had salted for themselves. Some of them.
Yeah,
Of course you would say this.
You can't
I'm
have
not-
salted.
Yeah.
No way you could
Gotta
benefit
eat something.
from the plague.
Yeah.
I'm gonna plague you with locusts, and you're not even allowed to eat them. You're hungry enough to eat bugs, but I still won't let you eat them.
Are they grasshoppers? Are they?
Yeah, not technically bugs, but
Because I had one at a baseball game. They're disgusting.
locusts are like grasshoppers but bigger and
Mhm.
Yeah. They are
more meaty
like a
as well,
natural.
like thicker.
Yeah, they are considered a natural disaster. I mean,
Yeah, definitely.
In my mouth. Ugh.
Yeah. Well, and they're kosher. Like I said, I mean, John the Baptist lived off of locusts and wild honey.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
apparently there is a couple of species that have been identified as being kosher, and there are some Yemenite Jews that eat those species that they have a tradition of eating, but like no other Orthodox Jew will eat.
I tried that, by the way,
You
and
did too.
it's not as good as it sounds.
They're yeah, and they don't sound good.
Yeah, there's also a weirdness. I think in the
I don't
we'll
want
get
to
to
eat
it.
bugs. You
We'll
want
get
eat
to it when
bugs,
we
you
get
do
to
that on your own time.
Yeah.
the
But by the way,
kosher-
Lilith, if I made you cricket vindaloo, I'm sure you would like it.
No,
oh,
no,
also
Aaron.
about the
I will
comment.
steal all of your beer for the entirety of the weekend if you try that.
Cricket vindaloo sounds like the worst thing I could imagine. I don't even know
You
what
use
vindaloo
you
is.
use a shrimp vindaloo recipe, and then there's it's heavily spiced. It was the
Yeah.
hottest vindaloo I've ever had.
I think vindaloo is the hottest curry. No.
Aaron, we're twins when it comes to like beer and hot stuff, except for I'm just not extreme as you, man. You like to knock your socks off, freaking spicy. What's the spiciest wing you've ever had?
But I would love to talk about that, but at another time. I don't want Tomer to say I haven't finished yet. We're out of time.
Yes, do the Jewish accent.
Oy
don't
vey.
you dare.
To bring over some Mormonism into this stream. Someone commented earlier about the prophet Elijah coming to
Yeah,
Passover.
the Passover. I think
So
we'll reach chapter 12, then we'll talk about this because chapter 12 is more fitting for this.
Oh yeah, it talks about.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
it
then
talks about
we got a
blasphemy.
comment from Nod for $4.99. Says, to Aaron and all, thank you for your work. Any advice for dealing with my Mormon family? Do I cut ties or do I just smile and wave / pretend? Well, try smiling and try smiling and pretending, because I didn't, and none of my family talks to me anymore.
I guess
At
you
all.
have to decide how toxic your
That sounds
family
nice.
is, because I have reached peace with the believers in my immediate family, and I have some extended family that not so much. They're actually in Alberta. I don't think I'll be visiting them. They probably don't want me corrupting their children with my evil, godless ways. But honestly, it's yeah. For me, I had to come out about it and be like, this is where I'm standing. We're going to reach a point of mutual respect on this, or we aren't. So let's hammer it out. And we did.
Yeah. So
Um,
my family was more or less okay with me not worshiping God, but when I didn't worship the orange God, the one that they think is still president, despite the fact that he was arrested today, when I didn't worship the orange God, then they cut all ties altogether.
I have to say, because we mentioned Revelation earlier, I pointed this out to my mother, who is still a Christian, but she also grew up like she was a Jesus freak in the 70s. And I said, Trump is going all in for the Antichrist here, like the world leader who has all the believers following him, who has,
The mark on their foreheads.
The mark on the forehead, who has, who compares himself constantly to God, and people start saying, a lot of his followers start comparing him to Jesus in ways that are like, I find offensive, and I'm not a believer. Like, I'm like, whoa, that is way over the line. Like, and behold, he shall send a Lion of Judah, blah, blah, blah. And they're prophesying things that I only ever heard, phrases, buzzwords that I only ever heard associated with Jesus. And I pointed out to my mother, he's the Antichrist according to I don't even believe in the Antichrist. I didn't write this playbook. Evangelicals wrote this playbook of this specific narrative of the Antichrist, and they're fulfilling it with Trump. They're doing it themselves. The call is coming from inside the house.
Did you see Trump? Did you see Trump with the golden calf, like with,
yes!
with the Republican Party convention?
Yes. The gold thing, literally, and they're doing everything. I'm like, guys, you've written like 700 books. You've made tons of movies terrorizing yourself about this happening. Why are you siding with the guy who fits your narrative for the son of Satan? I don't understand. I don't get it.
I'm going to read a couple more comments, and then we're going to get going.
Yes.
Anton Gomez says, Lilith Liberated. Do you perhaps have a link to the documentary that you mentioned?
I'm looking for one on YouTube right now. I'm going to put it. Yeah, I'm going to send it to Peter and put it in the comments. Maybe I can put it in the description. I just want to make sure it's the right one.
You can put it in the chat in here in StreamYard, Lilith, and I'll put it in the live chat.
Will do.
Okay. And then Frederick Agerbo says, with all respect, P-Town, but Lawrence's opinion is the scholarly consensus. I appreciate you, P-Town, but please stop trying to pick a fight. Mind you, this is Frederick Agerbo. This is somebody commenting. This is not me saying that. And I'm going to tell people, don't pick on P-Town, because then it makes me look bad when I've already started doing that.
That's what I'm here for. Lawrence, I didn't mean to pick a fight, and I don't think. What was it? Are you the scholarly? What was the question?
Lawrence is, and I'm enormously proud of this. I mean, I've met Lawrence years ago when he was just an activist, and I saw in him kind of the same thing that I see in Lilith. I say, you're so studied. And he was in a moment when he was like talking about what he should do with the rest of his life, and I encouraged him. I asked him to please put some letters behind his name, get some scholarship behind the work that he's already done. And I don't want to take any credit from the work that he's done, but I am very proud that I pleaded with him to become a biblical scholar, and he is well on his way to doing that.
Well, I appreciate that, but it was your words that ultimately did convince me to go back to school and actually do it more seriously. Because for the most part, I do my work at home outside of school. I think school is very constrictive in that way. It's very streamlined, right? And I want to feel like that. Here's the direction you're going, right? So most of my work is autodidactic. So I am doing it myself, and I am finding credible sources, and I'm evaluating them on my own. And that, to me, that feels much more like real. Not that there's any wrong, like not that they're doing it like the wrong way in schools, but for me personally, it is constrictive. Luckily, I am currently in my religious studies course. The professor is a pastor, and he keeps the classroom secular, and he makes a very big point about keeping it secular. How in the classroom it should just be scholarship all the time, and he doesn't let his personal faith get in the way of it. And he is cool enough to let me use one of my older projects, not class project, but like, one of the older videos that I made as the final for the class project, because he's like, you know what, you've already done the work. Like, you don't have to put in more effort than you've already done. So I want to get him on my show at some point. I think it'd be cool to have him on there. But either way, P-Town, I didn't feel like you were picking a fight or anything. I think asking questions is a very good thing, and going against the scholarly consensus to find the answers you're looking for is also a good thing. Uh, so I don't blame you for that. There are points in my scholarship now where I'm going against consensus. Now it's not like on a big of a subject as this, but it is on smaller ones, right? Like
Well, you were against Devaris, like you were against the scholarship there, right?
uh,
Somewhat.
the
Well, anyway,
scholarship.
I just want to make it clear that, picking a fight, if you want to put it that way, is kind of how I learned. So I got to apologize up front.
Yeah, I mean
And
that's
I'm looking forward to you and I talking more, Lauren.
yes, I would
Yeah,
like that.
we appreciate the apology, but I don't think any of us took offense.
Yeah, I didn't. Yeah.
Yeah.
I put the link. I sent the link to Peter. I think that's the documentary I was thinking about, but I watched several documentaries around that time. So if I'll do some more research, and if that is not the documentary that I was thinking about with that particular origin story of Israel and talking about the overthrow of that city and everything, then I will find the one. I did watch as well, because like I said, I've watched like half a dozen documentaries on this all around the same time that I was sort of getting my overview, because it was, not that I wouldn't read the books, but it was faster to get an overview with that and then get into the books. So
Shall we continue, Tomei?
I see one comment. I think Aaron should respond to this.
did we miss one?
All right,
Yeah,
that
there is another one.
is okay, so yes, Nod offers $4.99. It says appreciate the responses. Living in a Christian/Mormon environment is rough, yet you all bring reason to the insanity. Keep on keeping on. Thank you very much for that.
Reason bless.
Okay, let's move on. Verse 21, the plague of darkness, finally. Then the Lord said to Moses, hold out your arm toward the sky, that there may be darkness upon the land of Egypt, a darkness that can be touched. Moses held out his hand toward the sky, and thick darkness descended upon all the land of Egypt for 3 days. People could not see one another, and for 3 days no one could move about. But all the Israelites enjoyed light in their dwellings. Pharaoh then summoned Moses and said, go, worship the Lord. Only your flocks and your herds shall be left behind. Even your dependents may go with you. But Moses said, you yourself must provide us with sacrifices and burnt offerings to offer up to our God, the Lord. Our own livestock, too, shall go along with us. Not a hoof shall remain behind, for we must select from it for the worship of our God, the Lord. And we shall not know with what we are to worship the Lord until we arrive there. But the Lord stiffened Pharaoh's heart, and he would not agree to let them go. Pharaoh said to him, "Begone from me! Take care not to see me again, for the moment you look upon my face, you shall die." And Moses replied, "You have spoken rightly. I shall not see your face again."
See, this is all 3 days means forever. I've heard in some cultures that if you say I'll do it in 3 days, it means I'll never do it. And this is clearly like we want to go for 3 days, and Pharaoh's not buying it. But honestly, at this point, a darkness that can be touched. I once heard, and I don't know how true this is, that the Vatican used to have a jar of the darkness from Egypt, like the because it's a darkness that could be touched. It was a material darkness, like the darkness that God separated, throwing chunks over his shoulder from the light. Yeah.
Yeah, so about that, the word that is translated as felt here in Hebrew is yamesh, while the Septuagint, Vulgate, and some traditional commentators like Ibn Ezra, Sfon, and Gersonides understood the word to mean felt or groped, others disagreed. Rashi and Rashbam, for example, wrote that it should be read as ya'amesh, from the word emesh, which means the previous night. And so the sentence could be read, "The darkness of the previous night continues." Targum Onkelos and Saadia Gaon read it as yamosh, removed. And so the sentence is read, "After the darkness of night has departed," i.e., when the time approaches near to the light of day. And I just, it's so lame. The Peshitta translates, "It will darken darkness." That's so lame.
It's really simple. I mean, we get it in the English language too. If you want to say like I feel gloomy, we associate lots of weather, lots of light. Like darkness is you're depressed. You're going through a dark period. I don't know. Someone help me here, but
No, I mean, the
there's
could be
it's
felt
pretty
could
clear.
certainly be like gives me the heebie-jeebies, which darkness all day long would probably do.
Yeah, I have a collection of 60 some odd black T-shirts, and I think one of them is blue.
What size do you wear?
And the phrase that I heard that I like is I wear black until they discover a darker color.
Vanta Black.
I have a
And
comment
there's
here
that one
by,
black that one guy copyrighted.
The blackest black.
yeah, the black is black. I think it's
Yeah.
Anish Kapoor. I think.
Yeah, that's
Is that,
right.
is that Vanta Black? Or is that a different
Vander
might be,
Black, yeah,
yeah.
that's the name.
yeah.
Okay. Nahum Sana also writes, "The ninth plague, 3 days of darkness, is described as a darkness that can be touched. That is to say, it was so profound as to be tangible. Nothing is said about the withdrawal of the sun. A perfectly natural explanation lies at hand in the dry southerly sand and dust storms known as Khamsin that sweep in each year in the spring. The atmosphere becomes hazy and heavy, a condition that may last for a few days and that keeps people indoors. The Egyptian text, Prophecies of Neferti, reports, the sun disk is covered over. It will not shine so that people may see. No one can live when clouds cover the sun." I have...
and I do
No,
have
go
one quote here from Sarna. So the plague of darkness, therefore, would have been regarded as the humiliation of the sun god. This is all the more likely in light of the powerful Egyptian cosmogonic, I don't know how to pronounce that, myth relating to the monstrous serpent Apophis, which is the one in the afterlife that he has to fight. This creature symbolized darkness and was viewed as the embodiment of all that is terrible.
Does it surprise anyone that I already have a snake named Apophis?
No, not even a little,
It
actually.
Yeah, I would also add
I'd be
that
more
Man
surprised if you
Raw
didn't.
has.
I would also add that Kasuto wrote that the plague is intended to be against the sun god Ra, again from reading
Right.
Ra'a in verse 10 as referring to Ra, since the sun will be hidden and be unable to shine upon its worshippers. Lilith, I
Did they
think you
know
muted.
that the sun god wears all black?
I do. Sorry. Thank you for catching that, Tomer. I was saying, Aaron, sounds like Yahweh's talking smack about you. What you gonna do about it?
See you in Nirvana. Let's continue.
Yeah. Exodus 11, that is a very short chapter. It's like 10 verses long.
Did you
And my
finish?
comment-
All right.
Did you finish already?
Yeah, I did. Do you want to
Ah,
comment?
there was one more thing, which is that Rashi says that because it says there was darkness for 3 days, and then it says they didn't rise from their place for 3 days. He says that it was actually 6 days, and the first 3 days was dark and thick, but the last 3 days it was so thick that they couldn't even move. And he brings down another story, which is that during the plague of darkness, God used that opportunity to kill any of the Israelites that didn't want to leave. And so he did it during the plague of darkness, so the Egyptians wouldn't be like, I see, you're also being plagued. And there's another story, which is that the Israelites would go into the homes during the plague of darkness and be like, oh, there's some stuff. And then when they were leaving, finally, they would ask their neighbors, oh, well, can we borrow this pot or pan or goblet or whatever? And they'll be like, we don't own it. But they'll say, actually, we know exactly where it is. It's over there, because they saw it during the plague of darkness. Yeah. Which is why we like Rashi, because he just brings up all of these weird stories.
Yeah,
So the
I
Jews
love Rashi.
and they couldn't. The Egyptians couldn't.
Yeah, so going back to those coloring books,
Yeah.
Egyptians can't even move. They're stuck in the darkness, and the Israelite children are walking around with like a halo.
Yeah, okay, glowing. Yeah, no, that's pretty typical for the Bible. Good people glow because reasons and God and magic, and shut up.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Is there a chance that it's getting? Is there a chance that it's getting? No, Jinx. Go ahead, Arn.
No, you finish, please.
Isn't there a chance that we're going to this climactic point where darkness is kind of, there's a spiritual aspect here? I'm just getting that feeling. Like
you have to read that from a Christian perspective, not a Jewish or an Egyptian perspective. That's entirely the concept of spiritual warfare, as you are referring to, is it's a solely Christian phenomenon.
Well, I'm talking about something I think that's real. There's so many people out there that struggle with depression, people who really suffer with depression that are absent of worldly things. They'll talk about the darkness.
Yeah, it's
being
not
the worst thing in the
spiritual,
world.
It's medical.
Yeah, it's interesting how, people like to be biblical literalist about certain things, but then the things which are just very literal, they'll be like, no, this is actually an allegory for something completely different. And I can't remember the other example. But
in fairness to the Egyptians, depression over losing all your food.
Well, in this case, a literal interpretation would be spiritual. We're talking about darkness that can be felt. Yeah. Anyway, we can move on.
I don't know. It sounds like a good song. It would make a good metal song.
I could see that. Oh, yes, but we do have to move on to the chapter where God proves how pro-life he is and how important the welfare of children is.
Okay, since Tomer wanted to read the last one because of some tradition in his life, and P-Town had wanted to read it, so this is his opportunity. I think P-Town should read this one. We're going to go Exodus 11.
Yep.
Which version do you want?
We'll probably do it in one.
But the agreement was that you would be God, though, right?
No. I don't want to do that. I don't want to divide the lines up.
You do it,
because it's fun when you do it right. But most of the time we're just stumbling over ourselves, and I don't want to be.
There's a chance you and I can do it right. We could try.
Now we could,
the Lord had said to Moses. All right. You win.
Maybe when we have more time.
All right. The plague on the firstborn, according to the NIV, chapter 11. Now the Lord said to Moses, I will bring one more plague on Pharaoh and on Egypt. After that, he will let you go from here. And when he does, he will drive you out completely. Let the people that men and women alike are to ask their neighbors for articles of silver and gold. The Lord made the Egyptians favorably disposed toward the people, and Moses himself was highly regarded in Egypt by Pharaoh's officials and by the people. So Moses said, this is what the Lord says, about midnight I will go throughout Egypt. Every firstborn son in Egypt will die, from the firstborn son of Pharaoh, who sits on the throne, to the first son of the female slave who is at her handmill, and all the firstborn of the cattle as well. There will be loud wailing throughout Egypt. worse than there has ever been or ever will be again. But among the Israelites, not a dog will bark at any person or animal. Then you will know that the Lord makes a distinction between Egypt and Israel. All these officials of yours will come to me, bowing down before me and saying, Go, you and all the people who follow you. After that I will leave. Then Moses, hot with anger, left Pharaoh. The Lord had said to Moses, Pharaoh will refuse to listen to you, so that my wonders may be multiplied in Egypt. Moses and Aaron performed all these wonders before Pharaoh, but the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he would not let the Israelites go out of his country.
So yeah, we get the
Okay.
announcement of the final plague here, and the yeah, we are going to get into this more next time, right? Because I don't think we'll be covering chapter 12 today.
Yeah,
we
full
will. I think we
Passover.
will cover. No, I think. God damn it, Lily. I think that chapter 12. We should only read 1 to 20 because that's mostly about the Passover sacrifice.
Okay. So I'm not sure when I
We're
should
gonna
put
we're
this
gonna
in the-
read 20 verses of chapter 12 today.
Sure, why not?
Well, Passover is coming, but I'd
I'm
like to
not doing
point
it.
out that God specifically says that he orchestrated this entire thing, including hardening Pharaoh's heart, so that he could show his wonders which will culminate with murdering babies.
All of which could have been avoided. And so that takes me to one of the comments that I have to read. The governor said, ever since I was a kid, I wanted to know why God hardened Pharaoh's heart. Because if God was efficient, then we wouldn't have a good story.
I have found that all such questions are very easily answerable if you just assume that God is an asshole.
Well, I
do agree
think
with
you just said like he's a drama queen.
Also, yeah.
Drama.
Or I like the way
we
George
just-
Carlin
maybe
put it.
there's a new term, drama king. He's a drama king.
Or the way George Carlin put it. Maybe he doesn't give a shit, which would explain a lot.
So if anyone's
Maybe there's
interested,
something more important to the story than all that.
Then piles
yeah,
of
it's
dead babies.
it is what's it called in
His
etiology?
ego.
Where's the
Also, yes.
Landra to say it?
Well, yeah, it is.
Where
It
is the
is
Landra?
in etiology. Here, so the etiological nature, right? So they had this tradition of a Passover meal, and now they're giving it a historical story. They're giving it this explanation for why it arose, and I mean we get this all throughout the Bible. If anyone is interested, I do have a video on my channel called "Brief History of Passover," where I talk about how there were initially two separate feasts that were eventually come to be celebrated as one. So you have like the one that's you have the Feast of Unleavened Bread, right? And then you have the actual Passover one. And these two were eventually celebrated together. And I go over some of the evidence from Elephantine, for example, that separates them. So if anyone's interested in history of the Passover, there is a video on that on my channel.
Yeah, Peter, would you please put the link to Lawrence's video in the description, or provide it, because that was something that inspired me. I like the way Lawrence does his documentary videos. I mean, they are so well researched.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate
That's
that.
awesome.
Yeah. It's a it's a little disheartening, I'll be honest, when I do think that I do good work, and I know that it's not for everybody, right? So I'm not expecting millions of views, but unfortunately, not a lot of people are interested in those kinds of deep dives. I think I did a good job with the Suffering Servant, for example.
That was pretty good.
Yeah, I dealt that in the most objective way that I could, and on that one, actually, I disagree with mainstream scholars. So, yeah, but I didn't think it was Israel or a specific person. I thought that it was meant to be anonymous on purpose, where it could be anyone and anything. That was my conclusion. But I do go over the argument for that. It's like a 45-minute video. So, but yeah, I appreciate that you like those videos, Arm.
I don't have
okay
the
when
link to
you're a
that specific
young Earth.
video, Arn, but
I can send it. Though.
I do always
Pop it in
put
the-
Lawrence's links at the end of the show. I put them in right now. So if people want to hop over
Okay.
to his channel, follow him on Twitter or on Facebook, or go to
Milwaukee
the
is soft.
Discord server.
Okay, and I'm going to have to say that we may not be able to. I mean, unless we just want to really power through it. I have another appointment that I have to do in 35 minutes,
Okay.
and I'm
then
kind of
yeah.
like
That's
crazy
Wait,
busy.
shame because
Because-
I originally sorry Aaron I originally planned that we'll do 1 to 20 this part because it's like for this 1 to 20 is like 3 pages for me and another 3 pages for the next part. I thought we could power through this, but
I'm
if you
sorry.
think we can
We
power
should
through it and
wait.
be done by the top of the hour, because I've got another appointment, and I'm sorry that I'm crazy busy, because it's a matter of hours before I'd start a 1,000-mile drive to Phoenix for the American Atheist thing. I have a
We should wait.
trailer on the back of my Jeep
should
with
wait.
2 motorcycles
you know
strapped
what?
onto it.
Fine,
and
we
I-
should wait. We should
I
wait.
I'm
agree with
sorry,
you,
but
no- knowing
we're all
us.
gonna have things to say too.
Did someone
Tomer.
say
I
they
love
agree
your-
with P-Town? I'm just joking.
Even a broken clock is right twice a day.
Yeah, clip it and ship it.
Okay, so Toma, you have commentary for 11?
Yeah, I do. It's short. 5. The female slave who is at her handmill. So Kasuto writes that this expression is common in Egyptian literature in the sense of the poorest of the poor. For example, the opening section of the instructions of Petachote. Rashi comments that even the handmaids treated the Israelites as slave and rejoiced at their misery, so they should have died. And
like
and
that.
all the firstborn of the cattle. Again, Rashi comments that the Egyptians worshipped the cattle as gods, and so they are killed as well. Yeah.
You know, after the plague and the hail and the locusts that ate anything the cattle could eat, if there were any left alive, whose fucking firstborn cattle are they killing? Like,
Yeah.
we're 3 layers deep into there's no more freaking cattle. They're all dead. They're dead. They're dead. They're all dead.
And so all of the second-born cattle are celebrating that they get to inherit the legacy now. Right.
And
The secondborn shall inherit the earth.
mhm. And 7, not a dog will bark. So KJV translates "not a dog move his tongue," and JPS translates "not a dog shall snarl." Most commentators understood it to mean that no dog will bite or bark at the Israelites. Rashi comments that the word yacheratz, which is usually translated to move or bark, has the same meaning of sharpening, as seen in Joshua 10:21 and 2 Samuel 5:24. According to Shulov, some say that this phrase refers to a dog hibernating himself, using his tongue when feeling hot, tired, or sick.
Like
So the
panting?
phrase could mean that no harm will be done to any Israelite, from man to beast, including dogs.
I'd
If
like to
it
point
is-
out-
If it
sorry,
is that no dog barks, then it's proof that they had no Great Pyrenees.
yeah,
Okay.
that's true enough. Your dog is very, very chatty. He's adorable, but he's
I've
chatty.
had to spend most of this show today on mute.
And looking at you cuddling him warmed the cockles of my cold black atheist heart. But I
think,
I
thought
do
that
know that in
breeds.
many cultures, to have a dog bark at someone is considered an ill omen, possibly even an omen of death. I know Mark Twain in Tom Sawyer, they have that with when Tom and Huck see the dog barking at the
Yeah.
homeless guy. They're like, oh no, it's an omen of his doom, which it very
think-
nearly was. But
I think the ancient Egyptian dog breed of choice is the Great Pyramidese.
he will only eat triangular shaped food.
Only eats
Like really big,
Toblerone.
like pyramids. Like, yeah.
Baklava.
Oh, now I want baklava. Damn
Do
you.
you, so
Don't
let
have
me
any
ask you guys
tequila.
a question though. Would you agree with me that, since you guys don't believe any of this happened and none of this is real, it's just in, just words on paper. Do you think Egypt represents the world and Pharaoh represents Satan in this?
No.
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 So I could
Not Satan.
I think it probably is more
Well,
about
what about
the logical
Egypt?
thing.
Like, let's just say, does Egypt? I think it's pretty clear that Egypt represents the world.
I think the only analogy is Egypt can represent Babylonia, but that's
Yeah,
about it.
would be Babylon.
Yeah.
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 Or any other nation who took
just-
over Israel or
Yeah.
subjugated them or just generally
Exiles.
Yeah, not necessarily
Had
like
more
the
power.
world.
I think
maybe-
that's good enough for Christians. I think to
You could say spiritual
with you.
exile in the sense of like being removed from the knowledge of God or whatever, but nothing to do with spiritual warfare. Just
If there was any truth
Yeah.
to this story, Lawrence, is there any group of scholars who consider that the Exodus is based on more the Babylonian exile than anything in Egypt?
Like specifically off the top of my head, I like no names come to mind, but like this would be something more specific that I'd have to look into.
Okay.
So not entirely certain on that.
Have you
However,
seen anything-
when it comes to the question of Satan, no, that is just yeah, their idea of what Satan was is so starkly different to the Christian interpretation of Satan that it just wouldn't have been, that idea wouldn't even have been extant at the time.
I think it's
So-
interesting because for me, I would agree with you so far. Even though the people that I go to for notes and whatever comments, they associate Pharaoh with Satan, and I haven't seen it yet.
But
I mean,
and
in some sense, but not in the sense that
it would
up
not
to
have
this
been an
point of-
authentic hermeneutical take. Like if you're taking the exegesis that the thing has to mean something related to what it meant to the people today. If you're just reading your own theology onto it blindly, then you can say that. That's, again, as I've pointed out multiple times, a way to use the Bible as a devotional book and not as a historical source. You can draw analogies in all kinds of stories and make all kinds of points. That doesn't mean they're natural to the story, that they were intended in the story. But hey, you can, pull a scene out of context from a movie to make a point about men and women interacting that wasn't really the point of the movie. Like, you can do that, but that's just you illustrating your opinion. It's not evidence for your opinion.
Then the Satan character within Christian theology is not somebody that God would be hardening the heart. There would be no reason to do that because Satan is himself a God character. So he wouldn't be the pawn on the chessboard that Jehovah is manipulating.
Yeah, Satan would be the guy inside, putting the silica, the
That's why I
gel
get
inside the
even
heart
though
to make it hard.
He's
even
doing
though
the
even though my
underneath the
commentators will draw the analogy that the Pharaoh is like Satan, I think it's like people. I think Pharaoh's a rep. I know, Lilith is gonna go nuts over me, but I
Yeah,
just think
Christianity
that
has a long history.
your
of
dreams,
being-
sweet pea.
not like that. Control yourself a little bit. Yeah,
I don't.
you don't even
need
know.
to,
You don't even know
darling.
how good looking I am yet.
Oh my God, can we stop?
I cannot
Let's
imagine a
go.
thing more irrelevant to this conversation.
I
in
didn't
any
bring this
iteration.
up.
Yeah, you did.
Okay, who brought up how good looking P-Town would be to Lilith?
P-Town.
Oh,
No.
did I?
All right. So, is there anything else we could read? Because I do have to get to something else, and then I am crazy busy because it is hours away from a 1,000-mile trek.
I
And
Where are you
personally wish you
stopping?
could have read Exodus 12 for 1 to 20,
I
but
know.
if you
but we
couldn't,
should give it the
then-
respect of good conversation and not just skip over all the relevant commentary.
If we're having a show next Tuesday, then that will be on the last night of Passover in Israel. So
we
Yeah.
can certainly do that. And Tuesday? Damn, no, I can't
okay.
because I'm going to be on a 1,000-mile drive back.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
good
wanted it to be
lord.
symbolic because it's the start of Passover, so whatever.
Okay, well, everybody do their magical hoop-de-doo this weekend.
Homework.
And we
All right, all right.
or homework,
Maybe I
and
could
we
do
can-
something really crazy and just do this from the hotel room at the con.
Well, on
Maybe
Saturday.
that would
on
Yeah.
Tuesday,
awesome.
or I don't know.
I'm gonna see Arn in his
Depending
birthday
on
suit.
the schedule.
Peter just scheduled something.
You know what? We'll figure it out.
Yeah, we'll
I-
figure it out.
it's
It's
possible.
offline.
It's possible because I want to. I don't want to disrespect Tomer.
You don't.
It's not that I want to, but it might be possible that I could do something from the con. It won't be. It'll be from a hotel room somewhere, but
Arn, is
the background won't be.
is that going to be this Saturday?
Yeah.
Okay, then I might have to reschedule with P-Town and Mighty Chicken, but that wouldn't be a problem.
Okay, well, we are just if that gets in the way of something, if I'm not solving a problem, I don't want to create a problem,
I was just taking up your time since there wasn't a show.
I was just feeling bad that Tomer wanted to get through chapter 12, and we weren't going to get through chapter 12 unless we skip over shit, which isn't fair.
Yeah, well, we did 2 chapters today. I would say that's a win for us.
I
So
would say that is a win too. And
Yeah.
we'll try and
All
power
things
through a little
considered,
more
yeah.
during the law. Although I really need an oven mitt, oven glove for the face palming, because otherwise I will injure myself.
I just want people to understand what I'm going to be going through. I'm going to be doing if I was able to go at regular speed, and mind you, I'm going to be carrying a trailer with 2 motorcycles on it, so I'm not going to be able to go regular speed, right? So this is going to be like a 20-hour
Where are you
drive.
stopping at?
I don't know. I've got 2 jerry cans, so that maybe I wouldn't have to stop quite as often. But I'm going to be driving with this trailer with the motorcycles in the back, and then my 80-year-old QAnon-believing, deeply religious, Trump-loving Mormon mom wants me to give her a ride all the way back. She wants to ride with me the whole way back to Arizona, where her and I both grew up.
Did you know that Christopher Hitchens' God is Not Great, How Religion Poisons Everything is available in a lovely audiobook read by the author? I find that's an excellent way to kill about 8 hours.
I'm just saying, I'm trying to, it's hard for me to go 10 minutes with my mother without some kind of ridiculous argument. And I mean, of the silliest shit. And now we're looking at 20 hours.
Music and audiobooks or podcasts. Do a true crime podcast. Surely she'd find that interesting.
How Trump is a fulfillment of prophecy and how he's still president. Well, then why did they arrest him, Mom?
Trials and tribulations.
Yes.
I was going to recommend Aaron's playlist on Spotify for the I can't remember which one it was, but it's one of the earlier series.
Fundamental Falsehoods of Creationism.
Yes,
that's the earliest series. I've watched so many of Aaron's series through.
Yeah,
I still rewatch the one that Peter was mentioning that he got that clip from, where disproving, or what was it? Refuting irrefutable proof of God from that crazy cult leader.
Yeah, that's the only one that's available on. That's the only one that's available on Spotify, like the full thing.
Wow.
Probably because it's also a book.
All right, so P-Town, hope I'm sorry for the one rant, but it was only one.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I guess we're gonna have to close up here pretty quick because I do have to jump to something else, and then I have to do packing.
All right.
So,
if you need
anybody
a place to stay,
closing comments?
If you need a place to stay near San Antonio, let me know.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I hardly ever get down that far.
Well, all I can say is I'm going to go get myself some bubbly and have a celebratory drink and congratulate my American friends. Happy Indictment Day. To
And
all.
we should
in
also-
in the words of Chris Jericho, little bit of the bubbly.
Little bit of the
And we should
bubbly.
And we should also plan the schedule because we still
Okay,
know
we'll
what to
figure
do.
out
We'll
that
do
out.
it. We'll do it afterwards. Tomer, we'll
Yeah.
do it through email.
We can get to that later.
Okay. All right. So I'm not going to be broadcasting from the con hotel room.
Okay.
We'll see.
We'll see.
All right.
Okay.
Probably best. Okay.
All right.
Bye, everyone.
Love you all.
See ya.